it'd be fantastic to just go, we're doing audio, it's fantastic, we can do whatever we want, just put a box. No, you can't. You really can't. You have to be very careful.
Mothergrid is today a guest at the Olympiahalle in Munich, where we have as an interview partner Big Mick, who's mixing the show from Metallica tomorrow. Big Mick, how's being in Munich? How often have you been here so far?
I can never remember. It's been 34 years with just Metallica now.
From your point of view, what are the acoustic challenges of a center stage?
They're pretty large because, of course, with the nature of the beast, you create your own ambience. You know, we have as many boxes firing away from us. We have more boxes, in fact, firing away from us than firing towards us. So all those boxes that fire away from us create ambience in the room, which, of course, then in turn we can hear sitting in front of us. But then we only have, an eighth of the boxes pointing at us. So the ambience can become so great that it can actually overwhelm the near field sound for us. So you have to juggle this. Different venues have a different amount of reflection. This particular place seems to be a little bit on the lively side. Hard to say. I mean, it's a tent, isn't it, really? Which tents inherently always manifest weird stuff in the low end. This is pretty bright in the highs. The sustain 2.5K and above, it's kind of hanging around for quite a long time. Now, I'm hedging my bets that when we get some people in here and the temperature changes, humidity changes, hopefully the reflections will change dramatically and it'll calm down a little bit. I don't think for a minute it's going to go away completely, but hopefully it'll become more manageable. It's a little bit of a wrangle right now. TM came from a guy called Thomas Mundorf, a fellow German guy who worked for Meyer, and he came up with the problem within the round always, of course, is you have multiple sources of sub. Now, you know, none of it will be phase coherent 100% of the time. So as you move around the venue and you get closer to some arrays and further from others, but they still overlap, you'll have various zones within the arena where there will be cancellation. There'll be other places where there'll be extreme summing. So you might have a lot more or a lot less. And that has always been a problem of in the round setups, is the fact that you could always hear the other ones, as well as the reflections, of course. Now, the TM array, the concept was that it was a point source for sub. So we put all the subs, 40 of them, over the top of the drummer, hanging down, 4 columns of 10, 40 subs, which gave it a point source. So it radiated like an antenna, literally just radiated out. And because the length of the arrays made them very controllable, they didn't just spew below and above. So it became a narrow beam that radiated all around the centre of the arena. In fact, the problem we had with the TM arrays to make it come down to the floor. So what we ended up having to do is delay the lower portions of the array just to steer a little bit more down to the floor. And on a daily basis, depending on where the size of the floor, the size of the venue, we steered it down accordingly. And of course that meant then you didn't have different arrival times everywhere. You had one source. Wherever you stood in the venue, the sub always came from the same place, which made it way more phase coherent around the venue. So is it a good idea? Absolutely. It was a great idea. The only problem is 1100 subs weigh in the region of 7 tons. So you have 7 tons hanging right in the centre of the venue. Now, that's normally where a scoreboard could be in some of the venues, which also gave us a problem because they have an inherent weight. So it all comes down to weight. This stage design, this time around, with these moving cubes, each one of these cubes weighs 0.5 ton each, there around. So there's 52 of those up there, so that's 26 tons of the moving video cubes. Now, with all that weight, we had to get out the middle of the venue. We couldn't put anything heavy in the middle, because whilst the 26 tons isn't particularly a problem in itself. If there's an emergency stop situation and the cubes are moving, which they do a lot and very quickly, then if the power went off or something and they were moving when the power went off, the stall force, the inertia, you have to multiply the weight by 4. So you have 26 tons if they were all moving at once, which they don't normally do. But if it was, we could be up to over 100 tons of sheer weight. So the brief was we had to move the entire system out of the centre of the venue and start flying things further out, which is what we did. So we've moved out and we've gone on north, south, east and west, if you like, sub-arrays. We went end fire because it gives us more control over the dispersion of the sub-array. And we can also steer them down a little better with the stepped array. Getting it down on the floor, it's always a problem. So it's okay on axis with them, but you've got to make them bend down. So this was our solution to that. Is it the best thing? It's okay. It wasn't quite what was designed. We had about another 32 1100s on the ground round the perimeter of the stage originally, which was supposed to cover the floor, which meant that the flown arrays initially didn't need to steer down so much. But unfortunately, the power of the sub-package rattled the decks on the stage. So basically, as you walked around up there, it made your feet numb because the vibration through the deck. So James, singer, said, I can't really cope with this for 2.5 hours or 2.25 hours a night, and for a few years of having my feet go numb every night. And I'm like, So we tried all the cancellation. Bob McCarthy was here. Meyer are always very helpful with us. They're fantastic and such lovely people. Bob tried to help. You know, we did all the cancellations, cardioid, out-of-phase components behind the system, behind the sub-array, but we couldn't stop it. As much as we did manage to cancel the acoustic noise, you could stand on stage and it didn't sound like there were any subs actually on in the venue. We did manage to stop the sound, but we couldn't stop the mechanical vibration, because obviously the energy is happening. We just cancelled the acoustic wave later. And it was the vibration that was his problem. It wasn't particularly the overwhelming low end. It was the fact the decks just... Well, it's like a table tennis table, that stage. I'm not surprised. So I had to concede, and I had to get rid of all the subs on the ground. So now we do all the sub coverage from above. We used to use Audio-Technica vocal mics and everything, the 5400, fantastic microphone. I really like Audio-Technica mics. I think they've always sounded great. But unfortunately, James preferred the look of the Shure 55. So he's like, can you work with them? Yeah, I mean, we'd had the crisp and clarity of a 5400 Audio-Technica, which just sounded lovely. And then all of a sudden I'm reduced to an ES55, which I actually think is an SM58 capsule in a big square box. So we have to do some enhancements to make the vocals work. But he really likes the look of them, and I must admit, it's unique. You know, when you sing it into a black, normal handheld microphone on a stand, it's a bit... He goes up to those square things, you know, that it just has a different look about it. I totally get it. I tried the Heil Fin mic originally. I auditioned quite a few of these big diaphragm mics, but he preferred the look of the 55, so we went with a 55. I tried modifying a 55 with an Audio-Technica capsule. It sort of worked. It didn't breathe quite right in the low end. And it wasn't quite the right thing to do, really. Audio-Technica, bless them, they were great, because I'm like, can you modify one of these to incorporate one of your... And they're like, they didn't like the idea of it, strangely enough. Yeah, let's just make an ES55 sound like a 5400, and everybody will see the ES55 and see it in pictures, and really, you're listening to a 5400. Not really fair. And it's a good thing we didn't, because we actually have, I believe it's 150 of those ES55s, because we go through them. You know, we have an awful lot of vocal mics in front of the PA at festivals and stuff outdoors. So when it rains, as much as we cover them up in the day with bags, when the band's on stage running around, you can't have them covered up. They're just sitting in the rain. So we have them fail. We have them, the tonal balance of them changes. The top end will go off them. And as much as they're just a big old dynamic, they still suffer certain shifts in attitude. Now, that might be okay if you have a couple of them, but when you have, we have up to, I think it's like 14 of them active in stadiums and stuff. So for me to eat, and it's for one singer, pretty much, other than the backing vocal bits, which is just works. I EQ all the vocals on one EQ. So I bus all the 14 vocal mics into one subgroup, and then once I've EQ'd one of them, assuming all the others sound the same as that one, then all the vocals should sound the same. And I can make global changes instead of going through each vocal mic going, oh, this one needs a little bit more low end. Could you go back to number 4 because number 11 is sounding a little thinner or a bit, you know, you could be chasing around all day trying to all make them sound the same. The best thing is we found is to make sure they're all up to scratch, working within their own what are they, SE55 something, ES55s. As long as they're within their parameters of what they were sold at, then they should all sound pretty much the same. Putting them through one EQ works. Like I said, once one starts walking with a bit of a tangent, we have to get it gone, which is why we have 150 of them, and they go back to Shure and they service them, and we get batches come back, so we always have quite a few of them around. So that's the vocal mics. The drum kit, we've just had a change today, actually. We used DPA 4099s on the 6 overheads. We have 6 underheads as a mic under each cymbal, and the same 4099s on the toms. Well, do you want me to hold that? I can hold it. Here you go. And today we've changed to the Core microphones, which is the new DPA Core series that they've just released. And I must admit, I think they sound fantastic. I think they're so much better, more open. They're supposed to take an extreme amount of of pressure. They can take extra level. They have different ranges of how much pressure they'll handle. These are the high pressure handling ones. Obviously it's Metallica, should be high pressure. So we'll see how it goes on, but my first reaction to them is very good. So all the overheads, all the tom-toms are the new Core DPA Core 4099s. Then you get down into the kick drum, we have the standard D6 and an SM91 plate, which I set up 2 channels, like a crossover, if you like. One does oomph, the thump, and the other one does the click. So then as the band plays, I can vary. Does it need more thump? Does it need more click? I can just vary that. Snare drum has an AT side fire on the bottom and an AT side fire on the top, and a dynamic on the top as well. There's 3 mics on the snare. I wanted a little bit more crispness on the snare top, and the dynamic would never give me that. And I mean, inherently, you'd always just put a 57 or something on the top, a condenser on the bottom for the nice spring rattle. That's your snare done. But I wanted the top to be a little bit more crack to it. So I thought the best thing to do is to have a condenser on the top. I didn't want to lose the body and the proximity effect that I got from the dynamic, putting it so close. It's an AT23. They don't make them anymore, but they have something similar apparently, an Audio-Technica again. But of course, it's a little dynamic. The closer you put it, proximity effect adds low end. So it's good, makes the snare fat. But as I said, I wanted that more crack on the top, so I introduced another condenser on the top. So we have a condenser top and bottom, both the side fire Audio-Technicas, and then the 23 for the normal dynamic sound. Hi-hat, another side fire, Audio-Technica side fire. And that's pretty much it for the drum kit. All the guitars are Fractal. So there is no mics anymore. It used to be the Audio-Technica 2300s, 2500s, the dual capsule one, in ISO chambers. But then the Fractals came along. When the band played the South Pole, all the equipment had to go ashore off the ship on a Zodiac speedboat kind of thing, these inflatables. You can't really lift a 4x12 in an ISO chamber onto a rubber dinghy and take it ashore. Much too big. And then, of course, you also had the problem with the amp racks. The pure weight of the amp racks was horrendous. So it became obvious there needed to be a solution to this. So the Fractal thing came along, and when I first auditioned it, on its standard heavy metal setting, it was like, I didn't like it. I'm like, what are we going to do with that? Sounds nothing like. At that point, I'd spent 30 years of refining Metallica's guitar sounds, changing mics, doing all sorts of stuff to get the sound together. And then it was supposed to be replaced by this thing that sounded like a buzzsaw, and I'm like, not impressed. But then, of course, when we learned more about the Fractals, the factory setting is neither here nor there. It's when you model the sound, you play the guitar into the Fractal and it learns. The guys from Fractal came out to the studio, hung out with the band, and the band played in. And they basically sampled the microphone setup we've been using. So we hadn't lost all that ground we'd made, changing mics and different plots and ISO chambers. We didn't lose all that. We just incorporated it into a different unit. We put it inside the Fractal, basically. And I have to be honest, fantastic. I mean, it really does work. So then, we just generally changed everything, and now we are Fractal on all the guitars, including the bass guitar.
And how do you handle the many vocal microphones? I mean, you have 6. How many are there for chips? It's 8 of them.
The way it works is that there's actually 8 around the perimeter. Then we have some special ones. We have a radio one that's a radio pack on a 55 that he can walk around with. There's another one we use for when we plays the acoustic, because it's part of a stand assembly. Then we have a few spares about that lie underneath that can be just appeared if necessary. And I have an assistant, Jay Day, who's my front of house assistant and Midas wizard expert. When I press the wrong button on this, he's the guy who sorts it out. Because it's funny. I've learned how to use it. Of course I have. I've had to, and I'm getting better with it. But I am an analog guy at the end of the day, and this is configured like an XL4. This is a digital XL4. It's set up the same way I would use an XL4. There's just more features, and it's great, and there's more channels. But when it enters into the XY network and the router world, that's Jay's world. This is, it's 5 computers plus 2 master controllers. There's 7 computers. There's everything. That's Jay's gig. He looks after he goes inside and fixes it and stuff. So his mixing job is to turn the vocal mics on and off as he goes up to them. They're never turned off. They're gated, is what it is. We gate each and every. You couldn't have them all open, so they're just gated, and they're gated to a point where they will open if he sings into them. But you have to be a little careful, because if he says a word that begins with an S, like sad but true, that manifests itself into add but true, because the gate will clip off because there's no voltage there to get it to trigger, because it's all. So Jay, he'll just pop the gate out for bits that we know that it won't open on. So he follows them all round. He also changes the volume for backing vocals and stuff for me, so I can get on with mixing the band. He takes care of the vocal plot, and then I have one VCA, so I set the volume of the vocals. He doesn't do the volume, he just does the mechanical side. And I have every vocal comes to that fader right there. So when he sings, I can pick the volume regardless of whichever mic he's on or whatever. I don't even know where he is half the time. We have a screen there, which you can see as a plan view looking down, and they're the vocal positions, because there's times we can't work out where he is. So we can look at that and say, okay, he's gone to mic number 2, or he's gone to number 7, or whatever. especially when the lights go down in between numbers and it gets dark, then we're like, he's going to start singing at number 6, you know. It's like that. So Jay sits and watches that and gets them turned on in time, hopefully. Normally works.